a lot of times we just see them as these chance encounters. But if you start thinking about the potential of a chance encounter, and then your unique mindset coupled with a little bit of tenacity and grit kind of make these connections, who knows what can happen with it.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. And please don't forget to subscribe. You do not want to miss an episode throughout the rest of this year. I have so many good episodes lined up for you. Plus, if you'll give me a quick rating in Apple Podcasts, that will help a lot too. All right. I am so excited to share this conversation because it is somewhat serendipitous that it happened in the first place. Dr. Chad Thatcher is a professor at SOU's Outdoor Adventure Leadership Department. And guess what he's talking about today? Serendipity. He has led expedition to more than 60 countries and has traveled to more than 90. He teaches about exploration and he helps others discover their inner explorer. He also talks about maximizing your chances of serendipity. In this conversation, we talk about how to have a mindset that's ready for serendipity, the impact serendipity can have on your life, and how to make a chance encounter from a person or something turn into something that is, in fact, something you'll look at as serendipitous. So let's get to it. I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Chad. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
I'm excited as well. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, right now I am a professor at Southern Oregon University in the Outdoor Adventure and Expedition Leadership Department. We also have a master's degree in Outdoor Adventure and Expedition Leadership. And so that's where I'm currently residing right now here in Southern Oregon University and in Ashland, Oregon. And my passion is around igniting that inner explorer that we all have inside of us.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about how exploration and serendipity go hand in hand. So I want to know for you personally, what came first? The chicken, the egg, the serendipity, or the exploration?
Well, the great thing about serendipity, it's a process where you kind of look back and you realize that something was indeed serendipitous. And so I think definitely these novel experiences that you have in expeditions and just in everyday life, those kind of come first, but you also need something before that. You need to have a prepared mind. So there's a whole process behind this idea of serendipity. And a lot of people think serendipity is, having a moment, like an aha moment, which is great, or a chance encounter, which is part of it. But unless you have a mind that recognizes these things, it's just that. It's just a chance encounter. And it will not turn into any kind of serendipity unless you take these active steps to pursue it. So it's a continuum. And so you have to have a mind that will recognize these things. If you don't have that, then you're not going to have any serendipity. Then you need these novel experiences. If you don't have those and then recognize them in the moment, that's what they are. They're just an experience that happened, but they may not turn into any kind of serendipity.
Can you take me to your aha moment?
Okay. So I mean, gosh, we all have aha moments every day in life. Or we have, maybe not aha moments, we have chance encounters that we're just full of them every single day. We will have encounters that even just going to the grocery store, for example, you can meet someone in a line there. And most of the time we're just focused on the plan at hand. I need to get in the grocery store. I need to get out of the grocery store. But if we do take the time to make some connections, these could lead to something pretty incredible. And so, I'd say a big aha moment for me was when I discovered this process of serendipity. I'll just explain it real quick. The process it takes about, you have to start with this unexpected event. You have to have this prepared mind. And that prepared mind is really the things that you have done in your life up to this point. They could be things like your previous experiences, your personal knowledge, things that you're concerned about. And with that in mind, we all have our own prepared minds. They're going to be able to recognize moments that pertain to us. There's tons of examples of serendipity out there. For example, Velcro was discovered from this guy who had he'd go walk his dog, and he'd come back and they'd have cockaburls on this dog, and he took it one step further and he looked down underneath the microscope and he was like, what are all these little hook things about? And then he said, all right, well, I wonder if this could be applicable to other things. Same thing with penicillin, for example. A microbiologist was out there and he dropped something in a petri dish, and he came back a couple weeks later and noticed that there was something dead in that petri dish, and he goes, what is this about? And that led to penicillin. Of course, I'm simplifying these down, but I mean, that's these aha moments. Now, when you have these, you need to go through this process of, recognizing that moment. And one of the words that we've used for that is having a sagacious mindset, sagacity. And this idea that you have the ability to discern and recognize a moment, to recognize that indeed, did you say aha? And did you think aha? And then when you do, what does that mean? So this ability to see connections. And if you don't have sagacity, which again comes from your previous experiences, then it's just going to stop right there and you won't go any further with it. Now, the next steps are just as important. You need to seize the moment. And sometimes we can have sagacity and recognize this as an amazing encounter. But then again, that's all it is if you don't continue with it. And so there's a need to act. And so you need to choose an appropriate action to kind of preserve and amplify its potential. Again, if you don't do this, it just stops right there. So you need to have an action, and it can occur right then, or it can occur much later. But there has to be action that will take you forward in this step. And so through that action, several things can happen. And quite often it's iterative in process. And so you can start going in a direction, and sometimes you'll even notice other little side serendipities that will happen. Mm-hmm. You'll start to notice, because your mind is focused on these things. And once you get your mind focused, you'll be able to recognize things in your life that maybe wouldn't have been so recognizable as before. And so there's an amplifying effect that goes along with this if you work towards pursuing this chance encounter and seeing what can happen with it. And that's where I think with adventure is mindsets. A lot of the students that I teach, they have grit and tenacity and persistence to get to the top of a mountain, for example. And if you could take those qualities and transfer them back into their life with pursuing these chance encounters, you'll quite often find that they're going to lead somewhere. Eventually you'll get through this process and you'll realize that you come to this moment in your life where, wow, something amazing has happened in my life. And you'll be able to look back and kind of do an evaluative process and look back and go, that moment, that chance encounter was indeed serendipitous. But it was a whole process. And so a lot of times we go, this is so serendipitous that we're meeting. I'm like, it could be, but this right now is just a chance encounter. This is synchronicity, which is a different word. And so that's just a chance encounter, and it can lead to serendipity. So it's looking back through this evaluative process, you'll realize, that was indeed serendipitous. So for example, the Rotary Club meeting, right? On serendipity, right? Mm-hmm. For that, that chance encounter that we had kind of led to someone talking to you. And then, it's leading to doing a podcast. And so when I look back at that process, I'm looking back, that was indeed serendipitous, that those chance encounters I had with those Rotary members. And so it's now leading to this. And who knows where it could lead to from this? I mean, someone maybe will hear this podcast, and it will lead to something different for someone else, but it has kind of an amplifying effect as well.
How do you know what to follow? If you don't know if it's serendipity yet, how do you know which way to go?
Well, that's where you come in as an individual, and that's that prepared mind. That's one of the things I talk about with a liberal arts education. You are exploring different areas and expanding your mind in different areas so that you can recognize these moments. And that's what I think is so important is this idea of preparing. All right. Quite often. I always talk about how to kind of amplify serendipity. And so some of the things you can do to amplify things is be very flexible in your thinking and interpretation. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we are very rigid in the way we approach things and the way we see things.
Mm-hmm. Black and white.
Yeah, black and white. So that can sometimes destroy, this chance encounter, right? So being able to be open to new discoveries is a big one. And one of the ways I did this, I've led international expeditions for years, and I've never seen students, for example, allow themselves, like when you enter a foreign country, for example, your mind is just so open because you are outside your element, right? You're noticing things that you would have never noticed in a million years if you weren't just walk down your regular street, right? But you plop someone off in New Delhi and they got to walk across the street to the train station. There's a million people in front of you to do that. There's a heightened awareness there. And so being able to open your mind to new possibilities, all right? And I think quite often it's those things that you're very passionate about that you're going to recognize. And for example, I've been thinking about getting a new car. I've been looking at, I'm sure everyone has, they buy a new car, all of a sudden they see that freaking car everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's because you have a different mindset. You're able to recognize those things now. I mean, in your field of view, there are things out there that your eyes are drawn to. And it's through your previous experiences that you're going to be able to recognize things. Again, it's different for every person. All right. And that's what the cool thing about serendipity is, it's unique. And one person's potential serendipitous moment is another person's, nothing, it has nothing to do with them. And so it's your deal. You have to figure out how to recognize those moments. And another one of these is to have an open mindset, but also quite often we are so plan oriented. And so we don't allow serendipity to happen. All right. And so we are just in this rush mentality all the time, where we don't have the time to recognize these moments. So one of the things you could do is, a lot of times when I'm planning expeditions or just planning outings, I deliberately take about 25% away. All right. Because a lot of times we will plan, but I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to just particularly if I'm going to do something new and novel, I'm taking that time away. And I know there's going to be chance encounters. And I'm also setting my mind up for it as well. And so through allowing time, you can allow space for that. For example, I just did my first virtual conference. All right. And no doubt conferences are an amazing place for serendipity to occur, or potential serendipity, right? Because you meet so many new people. And, I'm what you call one of those super encounterers. And there's actually some cool studies on that by Dr. Sandra Erdeles, and she does research on serendipity as well. And a super encounter is someone that goes out there and they almost feel like they have a superhuman ability to make connections with people. And these people will find themselves in potential serendipity moments all the time. And so for example, when I had my students, I was training them and kind of setting them up for this conference by talking about the processes of serendipity. And a lot of times just simply knowing the steps involved can get your mind thinking in that direction. And so that's, a lot of times we just see them as these chance encounters. But if you start thinking about the potential of a chance encounter, and then your unique mindset coupled with a little bit of tenacity and grit kind of make these connections, who knows what can happen with it. So again, this idea of opening your mind to it just by learning about the process, that can help open your mind to it.
Yeah, to even realize that you play a role in serendipity, I think that's new for me. Yeah. So why does a person want more serendipity in their lives?
Well, serendipity, in my definition, in typical definitions of it, it's a positive thing. Mm-hmm. And things, chance encounters can lead down to, bad places too. And hopefully through your discernment, you'll recognize that and be able to kind of get off the beaten path and like, I don't want to go down this road. But even things that could be negative, they sometimes can be positive as well. Especially if you are able to look at the lessons learned from an experience that wasn't exactly favorable at the moment, but it could be serendipitous in a way because later on in life, you'll be able to recognize that more negative experience as being very positive in this moment.
The first step of the thought work and knowing that there is a role, what else can you do with your mind to get yourself in to become what did you call yourself? A super
encounterer.
Super encounterer. How do you get there?
Well, okay. So there's non-encounterers.
Okay.
They're the people who just stick to the to-do list and they rarely wander off the margins and they're just like,
mm-hmm.
I'm focused, right? And then there's occasional encounters where they kind of stumble into serendipity. But again, this idea of being able to find treasures in the most unexpected places, I mean, that's what a super encounter is. And so you're seeking it out, you're looking for it as well. So again, I think it's a mind shift. It's training. And so I would challenge your listeners to take this moment when they walk out the door today. And when again, something as mundane as going to the grocery store, who is the person that just pulled up to you in this car? Who is the person in line? Especially, it may be harder now these days with the COVID distance, but there's still going to be these encounters. And I would challenge them to start thinking about, I wonder where this encounter could lead to. Now, it doesn't just have to be people too. It could be other events in your life. It could just be walking down a trail and you notice a side trail that you've never taken before. Mm-hmm. And you go, I wonder what this is about. So it's kind of engaged in this idea of exploration. And you go down that trail and maybe it leads to some amazing new path that you've never done before because you've been doing the same beaten path every single day. And then all of a sudden that becomes one of your favorite paths, mm-hmm. Which may lead to some, other amazing discoveries. And so, it's again, about opening that mind and being cognizant of the process. It's really about mindfulness, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you boil it down to it, and I'm sure you've had people talk about mindfulness, and that being conscious of your surroundings and their potential.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does somebody need to be on an exploration to seek serendipity?
I think it's easier when you set that time apart. Quite often we're like, again, we're so driven with our limited amount of time, right? So mm-hmm. I think that's a great place to start. And so you can set the intentionality there for allowing that to happen. But no, you don't have to be on exploration because I think life is just one big exploratory event anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So, life is just one big expedition is what I like to say. And so it can occur anytime. And quite often, that is the time it happens. I mean, one of the things I'll ask people is say, once they learn this process, like, can you think of serendipity in your life? And quite often they'll talk about their significant other in their life. Mm-hmm. And think about that. I mean, quite often it comes through the most unexpected event. And I'll have groups of people talking about it, and that's one they're like, well, I couldn't have planned that one, right? Sometimes it could be more intentional though. Sometimes they can maximize serendipity. A lot of people do like online dating and stuff like that, right? And well, that's maximizing potential, right? That's putting yourself in that place. And then, I've never done it, but I've had friends that have done it, and they've met the love of their life through that kind of thing. Right. But they were setting that intention, and they'll be able to recognize a person or and be able to recognize this may have potential. Right. I mean, we're doing it all the time, and it could lead to serendipity, which could be, translated to someone as true love, maybe. Yeah.
What does your life look like pre searching out the serendipity and post, like before and after?
Well,
what was the change?
It was fun putting a title of and kind of labeling it, right? And it actually came out of research that I did when I was getting my PhD. And one of the themes that kept on coming up from these international expeditions I was leading, I did a study on that just to get a rich description of what these students were encountering. And they kept on using this word, chance encounters and serendipity and things like that. So that's when I started going, So I started looking into it more. To me, it always seemed kind of like this, like flew idea, like, oh yeah, it's so serendipitous. But there's actually a lot of science behind it, and then really falls in this world of mindfulness and being conscious. And so, that's when I was able to kind of label it. That's when it really became interesting to me. And then I started recognizing, oh, my life's full of serendipity. And I just kind of lived that, way. I was kind of born into a family where we were exploring all the time. And, sometimes we'd have a plan and we weren't beholden to that plan. We would be like, all right, let's get off the plan. Let's go down here and check this out. And so I kind of grew up with that mindset and that mentality of seeking out different adventures. I grew up in the Air Force, and so that was another thing that happened to me. So I moved a lot, and so if I wanted to have friends, I needed to be. Now I look back, I was a super encounter. I would get there, and I'd be, hey, my name's Chad. What's your name? I think we're going to be friends. That kind of mentality. And I think I kind of grew up with that that idea that if you're going to make things happen, you gotta go out there and put yourself out there.
Is that the grit part of it? So you have the mindset, but then you have to follow it. And sometimes that means you got to speak up. Is that right?
Oh, yes. Oh,
okay.
Yes. I mean, I would say that could be part of the grit. Everyone's grit's going to come in different manners. For some people, it might be follow through. You might be really good at, making that initial connection, but then the follow through part, you make the connection, but it's like, then we just kind of fade off and do something different. Making that, everyone's going to have their different grit or perseverance story and the things that they are going to have to do in their personal lives to make something happen. That comes with self-reflection, right? And again, this mindfulness idea of looking, doing introspection and see, what is it that I can do to create more serendipity in my life?
Is serendipity always happening and it's up to us to recognize it, or does it happen once in a while and the more we recognize it, the more it occurs?
Yeah. So I would say, the potential of it is always there. And I would say true serendipitous moments that are pretty life-changing, those are pretty rare. But we can have a series of small serendipity events, things that lead to, smaller serendipity. But again, those things can lead to a bigger event as well. But I like your question. So I think no doubt the potential is out there always. And it's whether or not you choose to go down that rabbit hole or not. Get back to the essence of Ashlyn here and Alice in Wonderland thing. But she chose to go down the rabbit hole, right? And look what it led to.
So if someone's listening or watching, and they are thinking, okay, I know that serendipity, like I can follow this, I've got it. What are the next steps for them to maximize the serendipity?
All right. Well, okay. So, some of the simple things are, we have technology these days, right? And, I remember, going to conferences and things like that. And, we get a card from someone. I'm like, oh, I know it's going to happen. That card's just going to go away. It's going to sit on my desk and it's going to be, it's going to be in the pile of last year's cards. Right.
Yeah.
And, but for some people that might work, some person may grab that card and then they go home and they set that time apart to go, all right, this was that person that I met. And then I'm going to reach out to that person. And, some people may go through that process. I usually don't do that. I know how I work. If I'm going to make a connection, I will probably need to do something immediately in that moment to keep this thing going. And then I'm going to have to set a little bit of time aside later on to follow up in emails and things like that. So if I meet someone, I immediately say, hey, let's exchange an email address, and then we'll start right there, or a text message or something like that. So I'm one of those people that needs to do kind of a small step in the beginning. And I think, little things like emails and things like that will be a small step. I mean, just right before I was talking to another professor from Mankato State, and, I had met, she had sent me an email, and then I was at this conference and then met two of her students, and then they mentioned her, and I was like, oh, and that kind of triggered something in me. And I was like, oh, I need to do something right now to remember to, respond to this. But I mean, all these little events kept on going. And now we have this great collaboration going on. And that's, that's what it is. It's so kind of, I think these small steps, what are the things that will help you move things forward? Everyone has a different thing in their life that will help them move forward. And I think that's where that introspection comes in. What is it? People should go out there and think about, what is it that keeps me from making bigger discoveries, bigger encounters? And that, again, that's part of that process. And so if they recognize that there is a process, indeed, maybe they're not seeking out one of these steps. It's just, and each step is important, because if you don't follow through one step, it's each step is monumental in the process. It's just like the idea of, pre-contemplation, when, the stage of change, right? You get to the point where, like, you didn't even know it was something, right? And then you start to contemplate it. Well, that step from going through from pre-contemplation to contemplation is just as monumental as making an actual change that you can see and physically do, right? Or and recognize. So I would say, look at these different processes and recognize where you are on the continuum. There's just a given we're going to have chance encounters. I mean, unless you're a hermit sitting in your room.
Which maybe we are because of the pandemic. But
even then, look at what we're doing now.
We're talking.
We're talking, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you'd have to be, not be connected to the internet and things like that. I mean, talk about a rabbit hole of serendipity. I mean, the internet, is there's crazy encounters you can have through the internet. Mm-hmm. Actually, a lot of the research on serendipity is around information literacy and how you are able to find information through the internet. Another thing was, looking at, for example, peer-reviewed articles. Mm-hmm. You can do a search, come up with a really great peer-reviewed article, and then you go to the reference section. And then you can start to recognize the different names. As you start getting more into a particular subject area, you'll recognize people's names. Mm-hmm. And then you can go to the reference section, and that will lead to another area. And so, and these are these connections that library science has talked about. This process of serendipity as well. Recognizing where you are in that continuum. And so perhaps you need to prepare your mind more in a particular area. Perhaps you need to look and go, hey, I really do have these encounters, but they haven't really led anywhere. Mm-hmm. And why haven't they led anywhere? Well, maybe it's because that next step of being persistent and having that grit to follow through wasn't there.
Interesting.
So, and then just, again, recognizing those areas, that is a huge step in itself.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to figure out how I can be such a serendipitous person, but also be such an A-type personality. But I'll just figure this out later. But my whole life, I've been like, oh, serendipity. Oh, like everything, even like talking to you now, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Okay. So you mentioned that you were looking for a car. Did you find one?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking at some. I'm maybe thinking like a Toyota 4Runner might be something I'd like to have. And it's funny, after I started thinking about that, they're freaking everywhere. I mean, and I'd never even noticed them before.
It's so weird. Right? It's so weird. That happened when I bought a Honda Element years ago, and they were nowhere. And then suddenly they were everywhere. And it's such like a random car. All right. So my husband runs one of our local car dealerships. So, you know, if you want to connect, I'm just trying to get more serendipity. Okay. The last question that I want to ask is,
well, wait, before you go there, what you just said there was interesting, because that's another part of it is this idea of being able to express what you do in the world. What are your strengths to strangers and things like that, without coming off like, this guy's just bragging about himself. Right. But I mean, if we're going to, that's that conversation piece. And so in order to get to know people, we need to have conversations, and you need to be able to, like, right, what you just did there. Your husband sells cars. We didn't know we were going to talk about this, right? That was about as random as it gets. We're talking about serendipity. Now we're talking about cars and Toyota 4Runners, you know what I'm saying? But it comes through conversation and being able to recognize. So you recognize that, right? And then you took it one step further, and you started saying, hey, maybe this is a possibility here. And so now through this process, you're starting to think that way. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because I don't know. I
love it. It's great.
Okay. The last question I ask all my guests is, this podcast is about finding more joy in the everyday, in the good, the bad, and the in-between. What is your number one tip to doing that, to finding good in all the phases of life, the joy?
Oh, well, anyone that meets me knows that to really look and examine, are you following your passion? And I know probably people have said that, tons on your podcast. But I think, true joy is going to be coming out of things that you enjoy to do, and things that connect you to something that is outside yourself. And quite often that is something that you're passionate about. And so that's what I'm when I teach and talk to my students, that's one of the things I'm really talking about is, how do you find your true passion? And quite often that means you're going to have to create it. And how do we use these creative juices to create something that you are passionate about? Because most of the things, there's a lot of pre-canned things out there that we're just not psyched about doing. But what are the things that you find yourself naturally doing, right? And those are probably things you love to do. And so how can you arrange your life and pursue something around that?
I love that. I absolutely love that. I had to go back to, when I was a kid, what was I doing? What was my passion as a kid before it got clouded with all the things like make money? All right. Well, Chad, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've loved talking to you. I love talking about serendipity. So this was really cool.
Well, fantastic. Well, hey, thanks for your time, and you have a wonderful day.
I hope you loved this conversation with Chad. I really enjoyed talking to him. I love this idea that serendipity is something that you can maximize in your life instead of just waiting or hoping that it will occur, but to change your mindset and start heading in that direction. I want to thank you guys so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.